And the war in Iraq is finally over, and thousands of service members are returning home this week as Washington completes its drawdown of U.S. forces. Now, these heroic men and women have been exposed to sometimes atrocities of war. Many soldiers will find it difficult to put the past behind them. Some will suffer from what we call post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. You hear that term tossed around. We've tossed it around a bunch tonight already. It's something that can occur after a traumatic event. People can get an acute stress disorder, ASD, very similar symptoms, and then it goes away. PTSD will persist, and it requires one or more of symptoms from each of the following categories. So we're going to define PTSD for you. One of these symptoms, 1, reliving the event through upsetting thoughts, nightmares, or flashbacks. 2, avoiding activities, thoughts, and feelings that remind the person of the event. 3, loss of interest in activities, feeling alone, sort of symptoms of depression. And 4, angry outbursts and feeling that one can never relax. We call that hypervigilance. They're on guard all the time. Here with me to talk about this, Ken Schurer, a veteran of the Iraq War who began experiencing symptoms of PTSD shortly after he returned home in 2004. Actor Kevin McKidd plays Dr. Owen Hunt on Grey's Anatomy, and Kevin's character is a former Army surgeon who served in the Iraq War and suffers from PTSD. And Kevin, I understand you actually went out and interviewed soldiers like Ken to sort of learn about the condition. What did you learn?
Yeah, you know, when I started on Grey's Anatomy, they offered me this character. I didn't really know what PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder was, so I had to read, and I started reading books mainly about surgeons who were serving in Iraq. And then I started to interview Army liaison officers who, you know, every soldier gets a chance to access and help them with their sort of reintegration back into everyday life. And I really became hugely sort of interested and moved by, you know, the sacrifice that all the soldiers have gone through and what they're living. But, you know, once they come back, I realized it takes months sometimes for this condition to sort of manifest itself. It's not an instantaneous diagnosis, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, it can happen right after an event, or it can happen right after, then go away and then come back.
Right.
But the common thing, Ken, I think you were telling me during the break that it's sort of it's a fade into these symptoms.
Yeah, when I first came back from the Iraq War, you know, everything was still kind of the same. You know, nothing had changed. I was still
at home.
Yeah. Well, you know, and also back with my unit when we got back. But once I got out of the military element, that's when all the symptoms started hitting.
What were your symptoms?
Well, one, you know, high anxiety. You know, I was very.
It's like your engine is turned on at a higher clip all the time.
You know,
you're buzzing.
You know, and whenever I was in a crowded place, I would get really, really, you know, upset, and
we call it the agoraphobia is another name for that, which is one of the symptoms of PTSD. Sure.
Yeah. You know, and then I found myself also reliving a lot of the routines that I was doing when I was in Iraq.
Would you actually act them out? Would you actually have to do them to feel better?
Well, one activity that I was doing was I would, you know, patrol the house at night before I would go to bed, and I would actually do this with a gun in my hand. You know, just because I wanted to make sure everything was safe.
Did you have family that was living with you at that point?
Yes.
Did they try to discourage you from that, or did they freak out and say, Kev, what's going on, Kev? Come on now.
They really didn't even know I was doing it because it was when they were all in bed.
Right.
You know,
Did you think to yourself it was inappropriate?
No.
Did you finally? What point did you know you needed help?
Pretty much when I hit rock bottom. You know, I turned to alcohol a lot.
Common thing.
Yeah, to kind of suppress the emotion. Mm-hmm. And I really hit rock bottom, and I almost killed myself because of it.
And then someone got their hands on you.
And that's when I knew it was time to.
Yeah. Just out of curiosity, because I've heard this story more times than I can count from soldiers, and it's always somehow surprising to them. Do you have a message for some of the guys returning home and gals about not letting this happen to them, maybe reaching out for help sooner?
Yeah, I would tell everyone that when you come home, there's going to be change in your lives, and the only way that you can deal with that change is to face it head on. The same way that you would face an attacker when we're over there. You face it head on, and when you feel that you're in the position where it's uncomfortable, back away from it for a little while. And then reassert yourself in that situation to kind of wean yourself back into the world.
Now, Kevin, your character on Grey's Anatomy has similar symptoms, actually experiences a flashback. I guess it's during the night, which is sometimes what happens. Let's watch this tape.
Everything okay?
I am so sorry. I don't know what happened.
Now, I think if I were treating a patient that had a symptom like that, we call that a hypnagogic hallucination. You were actually in a half sleep, half out, and then had a flashback and acted out as though that were real, and then had all this guilt and shame and anxiety and remorse. I mean, did you talk to guys that had been through something like that?
Absolutely, and I think what was interesting when that episode aired, and it was a few years ago now, and I think PTSD is becoming more. It's great that you and the show are doing this right now. I think it's to talk about it more, is to get rid of that stigma. And people were fascinated when we aired this episode that this was happening and this was going on. It kind of shone a light at that time. It was 3 years ago.
So that was a novel thing at that point.
Yeah, I remember a lot of the fans of the show didn't know what this thing was.
Well, there's a long history in the military of not being really proactive about this condition. But I must tell you, I've been practicing medicine long enough to see the arc of what the VA has done with this, and they really are going after this condition and trying to do the best. They are making a diligent effort to go and treat this thing. And people like you, soldiers, aren't ashamed of having it. They understand it's a brain condition. And again, for my viewers, it's not a brain injury in the way that Cheryl's husband had a brain injury and had PTSD. Those were two things. This is a brain injury in the sense that it changes a little bit of the wiring and the biology in the brain. And the treatment, have you had, usually it's group therapy, other guys that have been through this, and some medication, and sometimes some individual therapy?
I tried to see a couple of therapists about it, but what I found for me was hard was to relate to somebody who has never experienced it.
Well, that's why I said it's usually a group. It's usually a group of guys that have been there, and you can feel like
no group therapy, no, but I have had conversations with other vets and stuff, and it does help.
I notice you shake your head a lot when he says and someone who's never been through this. Right. That must have been a frustrating part, trying to connect with these guys and understand them. And them saying you could never understand.
Well, you can't understand. I mean, the kind of the debt that we owe them for everything they've done is huge. And it gave me, in my research, it gave me such respect for the bravery of these guys.
This is the note. As long as you're our soldier sitting here tonight, this is the note that everybody comes to when they deal with you guys, which is hats off. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We didn't know, or if we did know, and we come to understand it fully, we owe you a debt.